They said it couldn't happen. Complete spinal cord severance. No hope, no cure, no movement, ever. But when the cleaning lady sang her grandmother's healing song, 8-year-old Melody's paralyzed legs, motionless for her entire life, suddenly twitched. Her billionaire father watched in shock as his daughter's impossible movement shattered every medical rule. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. The morning fog clung to the Hollywood Hills like a gray blanket as billionaire tech mogul Harrison Blackstone stood at his daughter's bedside, watching the rise and fall of her small chest. 8-year-old Melody lay perfectly still beneath her powder blue comforter, her dark curls spread across the pillow like spilled ink. Her legs, thin as bird bones beneath the fabric, hadn't moved voluntarily since the day she was born. Harrison's reflection stared back at him from the bedroom window, a 42-year-old man whose steel-gray eyes held the weight of every failed treatment, every shattered hope. His black hair, now streaked with premature silver, was already perfectly styled despite the early hour. The navy suit he wore cost more than most people's cars, but couldn't buy him the one thing he wanted most. "Daddy." Melody's voice was soft as morning rain. Her emerald eyes, so much like her late mother's, blinked open slowly. "Good morning, sunshine," Harrison whispered, forcing a smile as he leaned down to kiss her forehead. Her skin was warm and smelled faintly of the lavender lotion the nurses used. "Dr. Rodriguez will be here soon for your session." Melody's small hand found his, her fingers impossibly delicate. "Will it hurt today?" The question pierced him like it did every morning. 8 years of physical therapy, experimental treatments, surgeries that promised miracles but delivered only scars. His fortune, built from creating revolutionary software that connected the world, couldn't connect his daughter's severed spinal nerves. "Dr. Rodriguez is very gentle," he said, though they both knew gentle didn't mean painless. 3 floors below, in the staff quarters of the 15,000-square-foot mansion, Yvonne Campbell was already awake. She'd been up since 4:30, as was her custom, using the quiet hours before dawn to pray and read from her grandmother's worn journal. The book, bound in cracked leather and filled with handwritten notes in both English and Patois, had traveled with her from Kingston to Los Angeles 5 years ago. At 34, Yvonne moved with the fluid grace of someone who had learned to make herself invisible while seeing everything. Her rich mahogany skin glowed with health, and her hair was twisted into neat locks that she kept pinned up while working. She wore a simple yellow blouse and dark jeans, bright colors that her grandmother always said carried healing energy. The journal lay open to a page titled "Children Who Cannot Walk When a Spirit is Trapped." Yvonne's fingertips traced the familiar words written in her grandmother's careful script. "Some children's bodies forget how to move because their spirits are afraid. The healing begins with songs that wake the sleeping parts." Nana Hyacinth had been a respected healer in their village, known for helping children with all manner of ailments. But here in America, Yvonne had learned to keep such knowledge buried. Rich people, she discovered, preferred their help to come with medical degrees and expensive equipment. She closed the journal carefully and tucked it into her cleaning supply bag, hidden beneath bottles of eco-friendly furniture polish and microfiber cloths. Her work visa described her as a domestic service provider, nothing more. The mansion stirred to life around her as she began her rounds. The other staff, a cook, 2 gardeners, and a driver, nodded their morning greetings. She was well-liked, but kept her distance, sharing little about her past or the dreams that sometimes came to her about the little girl upstairs. Yvonne called Mrs. Patterson, the house manager, a stern woman in her 60s who ran the estate with military precision. "Start with the upper floors today. Mr. Blackstone has meetings scheduled in the main office after lunch." "Yes, ma'am," Yvonne replied, her slight Jamaican accent softening the words. As she climbed the marble staircase, each step echoing in the cavernous foyer despite her soft-soled shoes, Yvonne could hear voices from Melody's room. Dr. Rodriguez had arrived, his confident baritone mixing with Harrison's tenser tones. The latest scans show no improvement, Dr. Rodriguez was saying as Yvonne quietly began dusting the hallway outside Melody's door. The spinal cord damage from the birth trauma remains complete. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but we've exhausted our conventional options. There has to be something. Harrison's voice was strained. Stem cell therapy? Gene therapy? I don't care what it costs. Mr. Blackstone, we've discussed this. The experimental treatments carry significant risks, and the success rates for cases like Melody's are less than 3%. I can't in good conscience recommend. 3% is still a chance. Yvonne paused in her dusting, her heart clenching at the desperation in the father's voice. Through the slightly open door, she could see Melody lying on the specialized therapy table that had been installed in her room. The little girl stared at the ceiling with the resigned patience of someone far too young to possess such acceptance. Melody, Dr. Rodriguez said gently, I'm going to move your legs now, okay? Tell me if you feel anything. Yvonne watched as the doctor lifted Melody's thin legs, bending and straightening them with practiced efficiency. The movements were mechanical, clinical. There was no warmth in them, no recognition that these lifeless limbs belonged to a whole person with dreams and fears. Her grandmother's voice whispered in her memory. The body remembers what the spirit teaches it. But first, the spirit must remember it is free. I don't feel anything, Melody said quietly, as she always did. The words hit Harrison like a physical blow. He turned away from the table, his shoulders sagging. For just a moment, his carefully maintained composure cracked, revealing the broken father beneath the billionaire facade. That was when his eyes met Yvonne's through the doorway. She quickly looked away, focusing on a crystal vase that didn't need cleaning. But she'd seen something in his gaze, a rawness that matched her own pain. She knew what it was like to feel powerless, to carry knowledge that others wouldn't accept. Mr. Blackstone, Dr. Rodriguez continued, his voice growing gentler. Perhaps it's time to focus on maximizing Melody's quality of life rather than chasing cures. She's a bright, beautiful child, with the right adaptive equipment and continued physical therapy to prevent muscle atrophy. Get out. The words were spoken so quietly that Yvonne almost missed them. Excuse me. Dr. Rodriguez blinked. I said get out. Harrison's voice was deadly calm. Take your equipment and your resignation and leave my house. Mr. Blackstone, I understand you're frustrated, but you understand nothing. Harrison turned back to face the doctor, and Yvonne could see the fury burning in his eyes. You've been telling me for 3 years that my daughter will never walk. Well, I'm tired of paying you to prove yourself right. Dr. Rodriguez packed his equipment with wounded dignity while Melody watched with wide eyes. When he was gone, the silence in the room felt heavy as stone. Yvonne found herself moving closer to the doorway, drawn by an impulse she couldn't name. Melody had been repositioned in her bed, propped up with pillows, her legs straight beneath the covers. The little girl's face was turned toward the window, watching birds flit between the branches of an ancient oak tree. I dreamed I was flying last night, Melody said suddenly to no one in particular. Like those birds. My legs worked, and I could run so fast I lifted right off the ground. Harrison sat heavily in the chair beside her bed, his head in his hands. Melody, sweetheart. It felt real, Daddy. Like my legs remembered something they forgot. Yvonne's breath caught. Her grandmother had always said that dreams were the spirit's way of remembering its true nature. Children, especially, could access memories their bodies had lost. What if I really could fly? Melody continued, her young voice filled with a hope that made Yvonne's chest tight. What if my legs just need to remember how? Harrison lifted his head, and Yvonne saw tears threatening to spill from his eyes. Baby girl, the doctors say. The doctors don't know everything. Melody's voice held a stubborn certainty. Nana Rose told me, so in my dream. She said there are different kinds of healing. Harrison froze. Nana Rose, Mama's grandmama. She comes to see me sometimes when I sleep. She has the most beautiful voice, and she sings songs that make my legs tingle. Yvonne's hands trembled on her dust cloth. She had never told anyone in this house about her grandmother's healing songs, or how she sometimes hummed them while working. But children, her grandmother had taught her, were naturally attuned to healing vibrations. Somehow, little Melody was connected to something beyond the physical world, something the expensive doctors and their machines couldn't measure. Harrison stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Melody, your Nana Rose died before you were born. She can't. She can in dreams," Melody said simply. "She told me that someone in this house knows her songs. Someone who could teach them to me." The words hung in the air like a challenge to everything logical, everything medical science had declared impossible. Harrison stared at his daughter, torn between desperate hope and the fear of false promises. Yvonne backed away from the door, her heart racing. She couldn't be the person Melody's dreams were calling for. The risk was too great. Her job, her visa, her carefully built life in America. Rich people didn't want healing. They wanted miracles they could control and credit they could claim. But as she retreated down the hallway, Melody's voice followed her. "Daddy, do you think if we asked the right person, my legs might remember how to work?" The question shattered something inside Yvonne's chest. She thought of her grandmother's hands, gentle and knowing, as they'd worked with children who couldn't walk back home. She thought of the songs that had traveled across oceans and generations, waiting for the right moment to bloom into healing. She thought of a little girl whose spirit was calling out for someone to believe in possibilities beyond medical textbooks. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Melody's room as Harrison sat beside her bed, wrestling with questions that had no medical answers. Somewhere in the vast mansion, a woman with ancient knowledge in her hands continued her invisible work, unaware that the child's dreams were calling her toward a destiny that would change all their lives forever. The phone call came at exactly 4:37 in the afternoon. While Harrison sat in his home office staring at medical journals he'd already memorized. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Rebecca Thompson, the neurologist at Cedars-Sinai who had been treating Melody since she was 2 years old. "Mr. Blackstone, I heard about your disagreement with Dr. Rodriguez today." Her tone was carefully professional, but Harrison caught the underlying concern. "I think we need to discuss realistic expectations for Melody's future." Harrison's grip tightened on the phone. Through his office window, he could see the December sun casting golden light across the perfectly manicured gardens. Everything in his world was controlled, measured, optimized for success. Everything except the one thing that mattered most. "She's 8 years old," he said quietly. "She shouldn't have to accept limitations." "Harrison, listen to me. I've reviewed every scan, every test result from the past 6 years. The damage to her spinal cord is complete. T12 through L2 vertebrae, complete severance during the birth trauma. There's no neural pathway for signals to reach her legs." The words hit him like physical blows. He'd heard them before, but today they felt different. "Final. Understand your hope," Dr. Thompson continued. "But continuing to pursue impossible cures isn't helping Melody process her reality. She needs to learn adaptive strategies, not hold onto false expectations." "False expectations," Harrison repeated slowly. "Is that what hope is called now? Hope grounded in medical reality, yes. I can recommend excellent counselors who specialize in helping families accept permanent disabilities. It might be time to consider that path." Harrison ended the call without another word. The silence in his office felt suffocating, broken only by the tick of an antique clock his late wife had loved. Eleanor would have known what to say, what to do. She'd always believed in possibilities beyond what doctors could see. But Eleanor had died in childbirth, and Harrison had been fighting alone ever since. He found himself walking upstairs toward Melody's room, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpeting. The hallway was quiet except for the soft sound of humming coming from somewhere nearby. As he rounded the corner, he saw Yvonne cleaning the windows outside Melody's door, her voice carrying a melody he didn't recognize. The tune was unlike anything he'd heard before. It seemed to flow like water over stones, each note carrying warmth that made his chest feel less tight. There was something ancient about it, something that spoke to parts of him that had forgotten how to listen. Yvonne didn't notice him watching as she moved her cloth across the glass in gentle circles, her voice weaving patterns that seemed to fill the air with light. Her movements were graceful, almost dance-like, as if the song was moving through her entire body. He was about to continue to Melody's room when he heard his daughter's voice. "That's the song," Melody whispered from inside her room. "That's Nana Rose's song." Harrison froze. Through the slightly open door, he could see Melody lying in bed, but her entire body seemed different somehow. Alert, expectant. Yvonne's humming faltered for a moment, then continued more softly. "Sing it louder," Melody called out. "Please. It makes my legs feel warm." The humming stopped abruptly. Harrison watched as Yvonne's shoulders tensed, her cleaning cloth pausing mid-motion. "Hello." Melody's voice was hopeful. "Are you still there?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Yvonne's voice rose again. But this time, she wasn't just humming. Words flowed out in what Harrison recognized as Jamaican patois, mixed with English phrases that seemed to shimmer in the air. Little bird, why you cannot fly? Your wings them strong, reach up to the sky. The earth done hold you, but spirit run free. Dance with the ancestors, come dance with me." Harrison felt goosebumps rise along his arms. The melody seemed to vibrate through the walls, through his bones, carrying something that felt older than medicine, deeper than science. Inside Melody's room, something extraordinary was happening. "Daddy!" Melody's voice was filled with wonder and excitement. "Daddy, come quick!" Harrison rushed through the doorway and stopped dead. Melody was still lying in bed, but her legs were moving. Not the mechanical movements of physical therapy, but tiny, involuntary twitches and shifts. Her right foot rotated slightly. Her left knee bent just a fraction. "Do you see it?" Melody's eyes were bright with tears of joy. "Do you see them moving?" Harrison's mouth went dry. He moved closer to the bed, his eyes fixed on his daughter's legs. The movements were subtle, barely visible, but they were real. After 8 years of absolute stillness, Melody's legs were responding to something. "Keep singing," Melody called toward the door. "Please don't stop." Yvonne appeared in the doorway, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Her cleaning supplies lay forgotten in the hallway as she took in the scene before her. Harrison's gaze met hers, and for a moment, neither of them breathed. "What did you do?" Harrison's voice was barely a whisper. Yvonne's hand shook as she gripped the doorframe. I didn't do nothing, sir. I was just cleaning and humming. I always hum while I work." "The song," Melody said urgently. "Sing the song again. My legs want to remember." Harrison looked back at his daughter. The tiny movements had stopped, but her face glowed with an excitement he hadn't seen in years. "Melody, what exactly are you feeling?" "It's like there's warm honey flowing down from my back into my legs. When she sings, I can almost remember what it felt like to kick inside Mama's tummy." Melody's eyes never left Yvonne's face. "You know the healing songs, don't you? Nana Rose said someone here would know them." Yvonne took a step backward. "Miss, I don't know what you mean. I just clean houses." "No," Melody said with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "You know the songs that wake up sleeping parts. Nana Rose showed me in my dreams. She said your grandmother taught you the old ways." The words hung in the air like a bridge between two worlds. Harrison found himself caught between his rational mind, which insisted this was impossible, and his father's heart, which had just watched his daughter's legs move for the first time in 8 years. "How do you know about my grandmother?" Yvonne's voice was so quiet it was almost lost in the room silence. "She comes to visit sometimes, in the place between sleeping and waking. She has the same eyes as you, and she sings the same songs." Melody's voice carried a wisdom that seemed far beyond her 8 years. "She said you've been hiding your gifts because people here don't understand. But she said it's time to stop hiding." Yvonne's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she looked at this little girl who somehow knew secrets she'd never shared with anyone. "My grandmother. She passed 5 years ago. She never. How could you?" "Time works differently in dreams," Melody said simply. "And love doesn't stop just because bodies do." Harrison felt his worldview tilting on its axis. Every rational part of his mind screamed that this was impossible, that coincidence and wishful thinking were creating patterns where none existed. But he couldn't deny what he'd witnessed. He couldn't explain away the movement in his daughter's legs or the connection between these two people who had supposedly never met. The doctors say her spinal cord is completely severed, he said, his voice hoarse. They say there's no way for nerve signals to reach her legs. Yvonne wiped her tears with the back of her hand. My grandmother always said that doctors see with their eyes, but healing sees with the heart. Some things can't be measured by machines. That's not science. That's not rational. Maybe not, Yvonne agreed quietly. But when did rational ever heal a broken spirit? Melody reached toward Yvonne with both hands. Will you sing again? Please? I want to see if my legs remember more. Harrison watched as Yvonne struggled with her decision. He could see the war playing out across her face. Fear of exposure fighting against the pull of a child's need, practical caution battling against spiritual calling. I could lose my job, Yvonne whispered. People don't understand. They think it's foolishness or worse. I won't let that happen, Harrison heard himself saying. The words surprised him, but he realized he meant them completely. Whatever just happened here, whatever you did, I need to understand it. Yvonne looked at him for a long moment, as if measuring the sincerity of his promise. Then she stepped fully into the room, her movements deliberate and graceful. My grandmother always said that healing begins with permission, she said softly. Permission from the person who needs healing, permission from those who love them, and permission from the healer to trust what they know in their bones. She moved to stand beside Melody's bed. Her hands hovered over the little girl's legs, not quite touching, but close enough that Harrison could feel the energy radiating between them. Melody, Yvonne said gently, I'm going to sing another song my grandmother taught me. But you have to promise me something. You have to listen not just with your ears, but with every part of you. Can you do that? Melody nodded eagerly. I promise. Yvonne closed her eyes and began to sing. This time, her voice was stronger, more confident. The melody filled the room like visible light, and Harrison found himself holding his breath as he watched his daughter's face transform with wonder. And then it happened again. Melody's legs began to move. The silence after Yvonne's song ended felt electric, charged with possibilities that made Harrison's rational mind recoil. Melody's legs had moved again, more pronounced this time. Her right foot had actually lifted several inches off the mattress, held there for 3 full seconds before gently settling back down. Her left leg had bent at the knee, drawing upward in a motion that looked almost like the beginning of a step. But now, as the echo of the healing song faded, the spell seemed broken. Melody's legs lay still again, and the room felt suddenly ordinary, filled with nothing more magical than expensive furniture and medical equipment. Harrison stared at his daughter's motionless limbs, his mind scrambling to process what he'd witnessed. 8 years of medical training had taught him to trust science, to believe in measurable results and proven treatments. What he'd just seen violated every principle of neurology he'd learned while researching his daughter's condition. It was probably just muscle spasms, he said aloud, though his voice lacked conviction. Involuntary contractions. They happen sometimes in paralyzed patients. Yvonne stepped back from the bed, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Yes, sir, that must be it. But Melody wasn't having any of their rational explanations. It wasn't spasms, Daddy. I felt it, really felt it, like my legs were remembering how to be alive. Her green eyes blazed with frustration. Why don't you believe me? Harrison ran his hands through his hair, disturbing its perfect styling for the first time all day. Sweetheart, I want to believe. But the doctors have explained your condition very clearly. Your spinal cord is completely severed. There's no way for your brain to send signals to your legs. Then how did they move? Melody challenged. It was the question that had been burning in Harrison's mind for the past 10 minutes. How had they moved? He'd seen it happen twice now, both times while Yvonne sang. But correlation wasn't causation. There had to be a logical explanation. Sometimes the body retains certain reflexes below the point of spinal injury, he said, pulling from medical articles he'd read. What we saw might have been residual nerve activity triggered by auditory stimulation. Even as he spoke the words, they felt hollow. Residual nerve activity didn't explain the coordinated movements he'd witnessed, or the look of pure joy on his daughter's face when her legs had responded. Yvonne was backing toward the door, her earlier confidence replaced by visible anxiety. "Mr. Blackstone, I should get back to my work. I have a guest bathrooms to clean before I leave tonight." "Wait," Melody called out. "Don't go. Please sing again. I want to show Daddy that it's real." "No, sweetheart," Harrison said quickly. "Yvonne has work to do, and you need a rest. It's been an exciting day." He saw the hurt flash across Melody's face, but he couldn't help himself. The rational part of his mind was reasserting control, building walls against possibilities that threatened his carefully ordered world. If he allowed himself to believe in healing songs and spiritual connections, where would it end? Would he become one of those desperate parents who chased false hope from one charlatan to another? Yvonne paused in the doorway, her eyes meeting Melody's. "Your daddy's right, little one. You need your rest." After Yvonne left, Harrison sat heavily in the chair beside Melody's bed. His daughter turned away from him, staring out the window at the darkening sky. The silence between them felt strained, filled with unspoken disappointments. "Melody," he said gently, "I know you want to believe that woman can help you, but I can't let you get your hopes up for something that isn't medically possible." "You mean something you can't control?" Melody said quietly, not looking at him. The words stung because they held truth. Harrison was a man who fixed problems through research, money, and determination. He'd built a technology empire by finding solutions to impossible challenges. But his daughter's condition had remained stubbornly beyond his ability to solve, and that helplessness aided him daily. "I want to protect you from disappointment," he said. "I'm already disappointed, Daddy. Every day, when I wake up and my legs still don't work. When I watch other kids run and play. When doctors look at me like I'm a puzzle they can't solve." Melody finally turned to face him, tears glistening in her eyes. "But for 10 minutes today, I felt hope. Real hope. And you want to take that away because it doesn't make sense to you." Harrison felt his chest tighten. How could he explain that hope without foundation was cruel? That he'd watched too many experimental treatments fail? Seen too many promises turn to ash? How could he tell his 8-year-old daughter that sometimes protecting her meant crushing her dreams? Meanwhile, 3 floors below, Yvonne sat on the edge of her narrow bed in the staff quarters, her grandmother's journal open in her lap. Her hand shook as she turned to a page she'd avoided reading for months. The entry was dated just 2 weeks before her grandmother's death, written in handwriting that had grown shaky with illness. "The gift is not mine to keep hidden. When the ancestors call through a child's voice, the healer must answer. Fear is the enemy of faith, and faith is the mother of miracles." Below that, in her grandmother's careful script, was the song Yvonne had sung to Melody. But there were other songs too, more powerful ones, meant for deeper healing. Her grandmother had made her memorize them all before she died, insisting that one day Yvonne would understand their purpose. "You have the hands, child," her grandmother had whispered on her deathbed. "You have the voice and the knowing. But most important, you have the heart that breaks for those who suffer. Don't let fear make you forget who you are." Yvonne closed the journal and walked to her small window, which looked out over the mansion's rear gardens. Somewhere above her, a little girl was probably lying awake, wondering why the adults in her life were so frightened of possibility. The truth was Yvonne was terrified, not of the healing itself, but of what would happen when she tried and failed. Back in Jamaica, when her grandmother's treatments didn't work, the community understood. Healing was a partnership between the divine, the healer, and the person seeking wholeness. Sometimes the spirit wasn't ready. Sometimes the body needed more time. Sometimes the healing took forms that couldn't be seen with physical eyes. But here in America, failure would mean something different. It would mean she was a fraud, a woman taking advantage of a desperate father's hope. Her visa status was already precarious. If word got out that she was practicing some form of folk medicine without credentials, she could be deported. Yet the memory of Melody's legs moving haunted her. The child had felt something real, something that had sparked to life in response to the ancestral songs. Yvonne's grandmother had always said that children were the best judges of true healing because they hadn't yet learned to doubt what their spirits knew. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister back in Kingston. "How's the rich family treating you? Still cleaning their big house?" Yvonne stared at the message, thinking about how to respond. How could she explain that she'd just witnessed something that challenged everything she thought she knew about her place in this world? Harrison was in his office, laptop open to medical research sites. He'd spent the last hour reading about spontaneous recovery in spinal cord injuries, searching for any scientific explanation for what he'd witnessed. The statistics were brutal. Complete spinal cord transection, like Melody's, had a recovery rate of essentially zero. There were cases of partial injuries improving over time, instances where initial diagnoses had been wrong, but nothing that matched his daughter's documented condition. He found a few studies on the placebo effect in pediatric patients, research showing that children's brains were more susceptible to suggestion than adult minds. Perhaps Melody's certainty that she was being healed had triggered some kind of psychological response that manifested physically. But that explanation felt as flimsy as tissue paper. He'd seen those movements with his own eyes. They weren't random twitches or psychological manifestations. They'd been coordinated, purposeful, and directly connected to Yvonne's singing. His computer chimed with an email from Dr. Thompson. "Harrison, I've been thinking about our conversation today. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss Melody's psychological adjustment to her condition. There are some excellent pediatric counselors who specialize in helping children accept permanent disabilities. Please call me tomorrow." Harrison stared at the message, feeling trapped between two impossible choices. He could embrace the rational path, help his daughter accept her limitations, and find happiness within them. Or he could chase an inexplicable possibility that might lead nowhere but deeper disappointment. The sound of Melody's voice calling for him pulled him from his thoughts. He found her sitting up in bed, her face flushed with excitement. "Daddy, I've been practicing," she said breathlessly. "Watch." Before he could ask what she meant, Melody closed her eyes and began humming. It was the same melody Yvonne had sung, though Melody's young voice couldn't quite capture its complex rhythms. But as she hummed, something extraordinary happened. Her right foot twitched, just slightly, barely visible, but unmistakably there. "Did you see it?" Melody's eyes flew open. "I can do it without her singing. I just have to remember the feeling." Harrison felt the world tilt again. If Melody could trigger the movements herself, it suggested something more than external suggestion was at work. It implied that the healing songs had awakened something within her that had been dormant, not dead. Harrison woke to the sound of rain hammering against his bedroom windows with unusual intensity. The weather forecast had mentioned possible storms, but this sounded like nature was waging war against the glass. He checked his phone, multiple alerts about a rare December storm system moving through Southern California, bringing with it flooding, power outages, and dangerous driving conditions. By 7:30, as he made his way to Melody's room for their usual morning routine, the storm had intensified beyond anything the meteorologist had predicted. The power flickered twice during his walk down the hallway, and he could hear the mansion's backup generator humming to life in the basement. "Daddy, look how angry the sky is," Melody said from her bed, watching sheets of rain slash across her window. The oak tree outside bent and swayed in the wind, its branches scraping against the glass like desperate fingers. "It's just a winter storm, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." But even as Harrison spoke, the lights flickered again, longer this time. "Mrs. Patterson is making sure all the emergency systems are ready." What he didn't tell Melody was that Mrs. Patterson had already informed him that 3 of the staff members, including the cook and one of the gardeners, had called to say the roads were too dangerous to travel. The city had issued mandatory stay-at-home orders for everyone except emergency personnel. At 8:15, the power went out completely. The mansion's backup generator kicked in immediately, but it was designed to power only essential systems. Lights in the main living areas, the security system, and critical medical equipment in Melody's room. The sprawling estate, normally bright and welcoming, became a maze of shadows and dim corridors. "Mr. Blackstone?" Yvonne's voice came from the hallway. She appeared in Melody's doorway, still wearing her yellow blouse, but now with a heavy sweater over it. "Mrs. Patterson asked me to check if Miss Melody's medical equipment is functioning properly." Harrison looked around the room. The specialized bed controls were working, as was the nebulizer machine that helped keep Melody's lungs clear. But the room felt different in the generator's limited lighting, more intimate somehow. "Everything seems to be running," he said, "though the heating system is on backup power. It might get cooler than usual." As if summoned by his words, a particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows, followed by a sound like breaking glass from somewhere else in the mansion. "That was the conservatory," Yvonne said, her face creased with concern. "I should go check on it." "No," Harrison said quickly. "It's not safe to be walking around with debris flying. Mrs. Patterson and I can handle whatever's broken once the storm passes." Yvonne nodded, but she didn't leave. Instead, she lingered in the doorway, her eyes moving between Harrison and Melody with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Are you cold, Miss Melody?" Yvonne asked gently. "A little," Melody admitted. The backup power wasn't providing enough energy to maintain the room's usual temperature, and Harrison could see goosebumps on his daughter's arms despite her warm pajamas. Without hesitation, Yvonne moved to the closet and pulled out an extra blanket, tucking it carefully around Melody's small frame. Her movements were gentle, practiced, and Harrison realized this wasn't the first time she'd cared for someone who couldn't move on their own. "Better?" Yvonne asked. "Much better. Thank you." Melody's voice was soft, but her eyes held that same intensity Harrison had noticed the day before. "Will you stay here with us? Until the storm passes?" Yvonne glanced at Harrison, clearly uncertain about her boundaries. "I should probably go help Mrs. Patterson with storm preparations." "Mrs. Patterson is handling the main house," Harrison found himself saying. "And honestly, I'd feel better if someone with medical experience was here with Melody. Just in case." The words surprised him as he spoke them. Yvonne wasn't medically trained in any conventional sense, but yesterday's events had shown him that she possessed knowledge that went beyond standard credentials. If the storm knocked out more systems, if Melody needed care that went beyond what machines could provide, perhaps traditional healing wisdom would be more valuable than he'd previously thought. "If you're sure, sir," Yvonne said quietly. "I'm sure." As the morning progressed, the storm grew worse instead of better. By 10 o'clock, the generator was straining to maintain power to the essential systems. The radio, running on battery backup, reported that this was the worst December storm to hit Los Angeles in 50 years. Multiple highways were closed, power was out across most of the city, and emergency services were overwhelmed. "Looks like we're going to be stuck together for a while," Harrison said, trying to keep his voice light for Melody's sake. But being trapped together meant confronting the tension that had been building since yesterday's events. In the dim lighting and confined space, with the outside world effectively shut off, there was nowhere to retreat to, no medical appointments to attend, no work calls to take, no excuses to avoid the impossible questions that hung in the air between them. "Daddy," Melody said around noon, as they shared sandwiches that Yvonne had prepared from the kitchen's emergency supplies. "Can Yvonne tell us about her grandmother? The one who taught her the healing songs?" Harrison felt his stomach tighten. "Sweetheart, maybe now isn't the best time. When would be a better time?" Melody's question was simple, but it carried weight. "We're all here together. The storm won't let us leave. And yesterday you saw my legs move when she sang." Yvonne, who had been quietly eating her sandwich in a chair by the window, looked up. "Mr. Blackstone, I understand if you don't want to hear about such things. I know they seem strange to people who haven't grown up with them." "It's not that they're strange," Harrison said slowly. "It's that they're unproven, anecdotal. I've spent 6 years researching every possible treatment for Melody's condition. If healing songs worked, there would be scientific studies, peer-reviewed research, documented cases. Maybe some things can't be studied in laboratories," Yvonne replied gently. "My grandmother always said that healing happens in the space between science and spirit. It requires both knowledge and faith. Faith doesn't regrow severed spinal cords, doesn't it? Melody interrupted. What about the faith that made you keep trying when every doctor said I'd never improve? What about the faith that made you spend millions of dollars on treatments with less than 3% success rates? Harrison stared at his daughter, startled by her insight. She was right. His relentless pursuit of medical solutions had been an act of faith, just faith directed towards scientific rather than spiritual possibilities. That's different, he said, but his conviction was wavering. Is it, Yvonne asked, or is it just faith in a different kind of knowledge? The generator chose that moment to stutter, plunging them into brief darkness before the lights flickered back on. In that moment of vulnerability, Harrison felt his carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. Tell me about your grandmother, he heard himself saying. Yvonne's face softened with surprise and something that looked like relief. Her name was Hyacinth Campbell. Back in our village in Jamaica, people called her Nana Hyacinth. She had what we call the gift of hands. Children who couldn't walk, adults with pain that doctors couldn't touch, people whose spirits were broken, they all came to her. And she healed them, actually cured them. Some she did, others she helped in different ways. She always said healing comes in many forms. Sometimes the body gets better. Sometimes the heart finds peace. Sometimes the person discovers strength they didn't know they had. Yvonne's eyes grew distant with memory, but she never promised miracles. She just offered what she could give. What did she give them exactly? Songs that her grandmother taught her, and her grandmother's grandmother before that. Hands that could feel where the hurt lived in a person's body. Plants and oils that carried healing properties. But mostly, she gave them someone who believed in their wholeness, even when they couldn't see it themselves. Melody had been listening with rapt attention. Is that what you were doing yesterday? Helping me see my wholeness. Yvonne turned to meet the little girl's gaze. I was sharing what my grandmother taught me, but the movement that happened in your legs, that came from you, from something inside you that was already there, just waiting to be awakened. But the doctors say there's nothing there. They say my spinal cord is completely broken. The doctors see with their instruments, Yvonne said carefully. But sometimes there are connections that machines can't measure. Sometimes the spirit finds ways to reach the body that science doesn't understand yet. Harrison felt himself being pulled into a worldview that challenged everything he thought he knew about healing and possibility. So you're saying that what we witnessed yesterday was what exactly? I'm saying that your daughter's spirit is stronger than her injury. I'm saying that sometimes love and faith can create pathways that medical scans can't detect. I'm saying that healing is a mystery, not a formula. Outside, lightning cracked across the sky, followed immediately by thunder that shook the entire mansion. In the brief, brilliant flash, Harrison saw something in Yvonne's face that made his breath catch. It was the same expression he'd seen on Melody's face when her legs moved. Absolute certainty, unshakable faith in possibilities beyond the visible world. If what you're suggesting is true, Harrison said slowly, if there really is some kind of healing available to Melody that goes beyond conventional medicine, what would that mean? What we need to do? Yvonne was quiet for a long moment, her hands folded in her lap. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of generations. It would mean trusting in something bigger than what we can control. It would mean working together, combining your resources with traditional knowledge, your love for Melody with faith in her own healing power. And if it doesn't work, if we try and nothing happens, then we'll know we honored every possibility. And sometimes, Mr. Blackstone, that's the most healing thing of all. The storm raged on outside, but inside Melody's room, something was shifting. The forced proximity was breaking down barriers, creating space for conversations that might never have happened under normal circumstances. Harrison found himself considering possibilities he would have dismissed as fantasy just days before. Sing to me again, Melody said suddenly. Please, Yvonne. I want to see if the feelings are stronger now that we're all together. Yvonne looked to Harrison, asking permission without words. Harrison met her gaze and, after a moment that felt like stepping off a cliff, nodded. As Yvonne's voice rose in the ancient healing song, Harrison watched his daughter's face transform with wonder. And when Melody's legs began to move again, more pronounced than ever before, he felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen with grief and fear, something that was finally ready to believe in miracles. Whenever you had to choose between what you could prove and what you could feel, share your thoughts below, and don't forget to share this incredible story with someone who believes in the power of healing. As Yvonne's healing song filled the room and Melody's legs responded with increasingly coordinated movements, Harrison felt compelled to understand the deeper truth behind what he was witnessing. The rational part of his mind still demanded explanations, but now he was asking different questions. Not whether this was possible, but how it worked and why his daughter was responding so dramatically. "Yvonne," he said after the song ended and Melody's legs had settled back into stillness, "I need to understand more about your grandmother's methods. Was there any medical basis to what she did? Any training or knowledge that might explain these results?" Yvonne considered his question carefully before rising from her chair and moving to her cleaning bag, which she'd left in the hallway during the storm preparations. She returned with her grandmother's journal, its leather cover worn smooth by decades of handling. "My grandmother wasn't medically trained in the way you mean," Yvonne said, settling back in her chair. "But she learned from her grandmother, who learned from hers, going back 7 generations. Each woman added to the knowledge, kept records of what worked and what didn't." She opened the journal to a page near the beginning, where Harrison could see careful drawings of human figures with lines and marks indicating various pressure points and energy pathways. "This looks like acupuncture meridians," Harrison said, surprised. "Similar, yes, but our tradition focuses more on sound and movement than needles. My grandmother believed that the body has memory pathways that exist beyond the physical nervous system. When those pathways are activated through specific combinations of sound, touch, and spiritual connection, healing becomes possible even in cases where conventional medicine sees no hope." Melody propped herself up on her elbows to get a better look at the journal. "What do the pictures mean?" "Each drawing shows where healing energy flows through the body," Yvonne explained, turning to a page that depicted a child's figure. "See these lines? They represent the paths that connect your spirit to your physical form. Sometimes, when there's trauma or injury, those paths get blocked or disconnected. The songs and movements we use help reopen them." Harrison studied the detailed diagrams, his software engineer's mind trying to process what he was seeing. "So you're suggesting that there's some kind of neural network that operates independently of the central nervous system?" "Not exactly neural," Yvonne said thoughtfully. "More like spiritual circuitry. My grandmother called it the body's remembering. She said that every cell holds the memory of perfect health, perfect movement, perfect function. Trauma can make us forget those memories, but they never truly disappear. That's why I can feel my legs when you sing," Melody said with sudden understanding. "They're remembering how to work." "Exactly, little one. Your legs haven't forgotten how to move. The connection between your spirit and your body just needs to be strengthened." Harrison felt a familiar surge of protective skepticism. But Melody's spinal cord was physically severed during birth. The neural pathways were destroyed. How can spiritual connection overcome physical damage? Yvonne closed the journal and met his gaze directly. "Mr. Blackstone, can I ask you something personal?" Harrison nodded, though he felt suddenly vulnerable. "When your wife died, did you feel it immediately, even though you weren't in the room with her?" The question hit Harrison like a physical blow. He'd never told anyone about that moment, about the sudden, inexplicable certainty that had washed over him while he was in the hospital cafeteria, 3 floors away from the delivery room where Eleanor was fighting for her life. "How did you know that?" he whispered. "Because love creates connections that have nothing to do with physical proximity," Yvonne said gently. "If 2 hearts can communicate across space and even death, why is it so hard to believe that a mother's spirit can stay connected to her child's body?" Harrison felt his breath catch. "You think Eleanor is somehow involved in this?" "I think love is the strongest force in the universe, and a mother's love doesn't end just because her body does. When Melody talks about Nana, Rose visiting her in dreams, when she responds so strongly to the healing songs, when her legs move in ways that medical science says are impossible, maybe she's not just accessing ancestral healing wisdom. Maybe she's drawing on her mother's love as well. Melody's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy rather than sadness. Is that why I always feel warm when the songs play? Like Mama is hugging me from the inside. It could be, sweetheart, Yvonne said softly. In my tradition, we believe that the spirits of those who love us never truly leave. They stay close, especially when we need healing. Harrison found himself thinking back to the moments after Eleanor's death, when he'd held their newborn daughter for the first time. Melody had been so small, so fragile, her tiny body broken by the traumatic birth that had claimed her mother's life. He'd whispered to Eleanor's spirit then, begged her to help their daughter survive, to find a way to be okay despite everything that had gone wrong. There's something else, Harrison said slowly, a memory surfacing that he'd buried under years of medical consultations and failed treatments. Right after Melody was born, when the doctors were telling me about her spinal injuries, I was holding her in the NICU, and I swear I felt Eleanor's presence. I felt her hands covering mine as I touched Melody's legs. What happened when you felt that presence? Yvonne asked. Melody's legs moved, just tiny movements barely visible. The nurses said it was normal reflex activity, but Harrison's voice trailed off as the implications hit him. But what if it wasn't? What if Eleanor was already trying to heal her, and I just didn't understand? And what if, Yvonne added gently, the healing has been available all along, but you needed to be ready to see it, ready to believe in possibilities beyond what medicine could offer? The room fell quiet except for the sound of rain still pattering against the windows. The storm was beginning to weaken, but the emotional intensity in the room continued to build. Yvonne, Melody said suddenly, why didn't your grandmother come to America? Why did she send you instead? Yvonne's expression grew complex, layered with grief and determination. She tried to come when I was younger. We applied for visas, saved money for years. But the immigration process is hard for people like us, people without formal education or professional credentials. Her healing gift wasn't something the American government recognized as valuable. So she sent you instead? She got very sick my last year of high school. Cancer. The doctors in Kingston said there was nothing they could do. Yvonne's voice grew thick with emotion. But before she died, she made me promise to bring her knowledge to places where it was needed most. She said she'd seen visions of a little girl far away, a child who would need the old healing songs. Harrison felt chills run down his spine. She saw Melody? Before you even came here. She described her perfectly. Dark curls, green eyes, a father who loved her desperately but didn't know how to help her. She even described this room, the oak tree outside the window. Yvonne wiped tears from her cheeks. I thought it was just fever dreams at first. But then I got the job here, saw Melody for the first time, and I knew. This was why I came to America. This was my grandmother's final gift. Your grandmother died, knowing she was sending you to help me. Melody's voice was filled with wonder. She died knowing that love finds a way to complete itself, even across death, even across oceans. She believed that healing happens when the right people come together at the right time, guided by forces bigger than any of us understand. Harrison felt something fundamental shifting inside him. The story Yvonne was telling wasn't just about folk medicine or alternative healing. It was about destiny, about connections that transcended the physical world, about love that refused to be limited by death or distance. If that's true, he said slowly, if your grandmother really saw all this before it happened, then this isn't random. This isn't coincidence. No, sir. I don't believe it is. Then what happens next? If this was all meant to be, if Melody was meant to be healed through your grandmother's knowledge, what's the next step? Yvonne opened her journal again, turning to a section Harrison hadn't seen before. The pages were filled with detailed instructions, step-by-step processes for deepening the healing work. The movements we've seen so far are just the beginning, she said. According to my grandmother's notes, True healing happens in stages. First, the spirit remembers its connection to the body. Then the body begins to remember its wholeness. Finally, if the person is ready and the love is strong enough, the physical healing manifests completely. How long does that process take? It depends on many factors: the depth of the trauma, the strength of the spiritual connections, the faith of everyone involved. But my grandmother's records show that children heal faster than adults because they haven't learned to doubt their own wholeness yet. Melody sat up straighter in bed, her face glowing with excitement. So, I really could walk again? Not just move my legs, but actually walk. Yvonne met her gaze with gentle honesty. I believe you could, little one, but it would require commitment from all of us. Daily sessions, complete trust in the process, and willingness to believe in miracles even when they seem impossible. Harrison looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Yvonne's determined expression. For 8 years, he'd been searching for someone who could help Melody. He'd never imagined that person would be a cleaning lady from Jamaica whose grandmother had seen his daughter in visions. But as impossible as it seemed, everything Yvonne had told them was proving true. And if there was even a chance that Melody could walk again, how could he not take it? What do we need to do? He asked. The storm had finally begun to subside, leaving behind a hushed quiet that felt sacred in Melody's room. Harrison found himself studying Yvonne's grandmother's journal with the same intensity he'd once applied to medical research, but this time his heart was as engaged as his mind. According to these notes, he said, pointing to a detailed diagram, the first stage involves establishing what your grandmother called spirit pathways. How exactly do we begin that process? Yvonne moved her chair closer to Melody's bed, her movements deliberate and reverent. We start with trust, complete trust between all three of us. The healing energy flows strongest when there's no fear, no doubt, no holding back. I trust you, Melody said immediately. I trusted you from the first moment I heard your voice. And I'm learning to trust, Harrison added, surprised by how easily the words came. Today has shown me that my understanding of what's possible was too limited. Yvonne nodded, then opened the journal to a page filled with musical notations and detailed instructions. My grandmother wrote that healing happens in layers, like painting. Each session adds depth and strength to what came before, but it requires consistency and patience. How often would we need to do the sessions? Harrison asked. Daily at first. Morning and evening, for at least an hour each time. The body needs repetition to remember new patterns. Yvonne traced her finger along the written instructions. And it's not just the singing. There are movements too, specific touches that help guide the energy flow. Harrison felt a flutter of concern. What kind of touches? Gentle pressure along the meridian lines, similar to massage, but with specific intention, and movements that help the legs remember their natural patterns. Yvonne looked up at him directly. Nothing inappropriate, nothing that would make Melody uncomfortable. Everything would be done with both of you present, with your permission for each step. Show me, Melody said eagerly. I want to start right now. Yvonne glanced at Harrison, who nodded his consent. She stood and moved to the foot of Melody's bed, her hands hovering over the little girl's legs without quite touching. First, we establish connection, she said softly. Melody, I want you to close your eyes and imagine warm golden light flowing down from your heart, through your belly and into your legs. Can you picture that? Melody nodded, her face serene with concentration. Now, Mr. Blackstone, I want you to place your hands on Melody's shoulders. You're going to be the anchor point, the love that grounds her during the healing process. Harrison moved to sit on the edge of Melody's bed, his hands resting gently on her small shoulders. The moment he made contact, he felt something shift in the room's energy. It was subtle but unmistakable, like the difference between a room that's empty and one that's filled with presence. Perfect, Yvonne whispered. Now, Melody, I'm going to sing while I trace the energy lines along your legs. Don't try to make anything happen. Just let yourself feel whatever comes naturally. As Yvonne began to hum the familiar healing melody, her hands moved in slow, graceful patterns above Melody's legs. She didn't touch the skin directly, but stayed about an inch away, her palms following invisible pathways from Melody's hips down to her toes. Within moments, Harrison felt warmth building beneath his hands. Melody's shoulders relaxed, and her breathing deepened into something that seemed more like meditation than sleep. "I can feel it," Melody whispered without opening her eyes. "It's like sunshine flowing through me." Harrison watched in amazement as Yvonne's hands continued their careful work. There was nothing mystical or theatrical about her movements. She looked like a master craftsperson at work, someone who understood her tools and materials with absolute precision. "The energy is flowing much more freely today," Yvonne observed quietly. "The trust between us is opening pathways that were blocked before." As she spoke, Melody's right leg began to twitch. But this time, the movement looked different, more coordinated, more purposeful. Her knee bent slightly, and her foot rotated in a motion that looked almost like the beginning of a walking step. "Harrison," Yvonne said softly, "put your hand on her right thigh, just above the knee. Feel what's happening." Harrison moved his hand as instructed and nearly gasped. Melody's leg felt warm, almost hot, and he could feel something like electrical pulses running through the muscle tissue. "What is that?" he asked. "The body remembering," Yvonne replied. "Nerve pathways that have been dormant are beginning to wake up. Not the damaged spinal cord pathways, but deeper ones. Older ones." "I don't understand. What do you mean by older pathways?" Yvonne continued her work while she explained. "My grandmother believed that the body has multiple nervous systems. The one doctor study is just the most obvious. But there are others that operate on different levels. Spiritual pathways that connect directly to the soul's memory of perfect health." As if responding to their conversation, Melody's left leg began to move as well. Both legs were now shifting and adjusting in small, but clearly coordinated patterns. It looked like she was trying to walk while lying down. "Melody," Harrison said gently, "what are you experiencing right now?" "I'm walking on the beach with Mama," Melody replied dreamily, her eyes still closed. "The sand is warm under my feet, and the waves are tickling my toes. We're collecting shells together." Harrison felt tears prick his eyes. Eleanor had always talked about taking their future children to the beaches in Malibu, about building sandcastles and searching for perfect shells. Melody had never been to a beach, had never experienced sand between her toes, but somehow she was accessing that memory anyway. "Keep walking, sweetheart," he whispered. "Keep walking with Mama." Yvonne's voice joined the healing song, adding harmonies that seemed to lift the melody into new dimensions. As she sang, her hands moved in increasingly complex patterns, weaving what looked like invisible threads between Melody's legs and the air around them. The movements in Melody's legs became stronger, more pronounced. Her right foot lifted several inches off the mattress and held there for nearly 10 seconds before gently lowering. Her left knee drew up toward her chest in a motion that looked exactly like a natural walking stride. "This is remarkable," Harrison breathed. "How is this possible?" "Love is the most powerful force in the universe," Yvonne replied, never breaking the rhythm of her work. "When love, faith, and ancient wisdom combine, they can overcome limitations that seem absolute." For nearly an hour, they continued the session. Melody remained in her trance-like state, occasionally murmuring about her walk on the beach with her mother. Her legs moved in increasingly complex patterns, and Harrison could feel the warmth and energy building in her muscles. Finally, Yvonne began to slow her movements and let her voice fade to a whisper. Melody's legs settled back into stillness, but Harrison noticed they seemed to fall into a more natural position than before. Instead of the lifeless arrangement typical of paralyzed limbs, her legs looked relaxed, as if she had simply chosen to rest them after activity. "How do you feel, little one?" Yvonne asked gently. Melody opened her eyes slowly, her face glowing with peace and joy. "I feel different, stronger, like my legs are more awake than they've ever been." "Can you feel them now?" Without the singing, Melody concentrated for a moment, then smiled broadly. "Yes, I can feel them. Not everything, but tingling, like they're full of sparkles." Harrison reached over to touch his daughter's leg, and was amazed to find it still warm, still carrying that subtle electrical sensation he'd felt during the session. "Yvonne," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. I was so focused on protecting Melody from false hope that I almost prevented her from receiving real healing." "You were being a good father," Yvonne replied. "Protecting your child is never wrong. But sometimes protection means opening doors instead of keeping them closed." "What happens next? How do we build on what happened today?" Yvonne consulted her grandmother's journal again. "We do this twice daily, gradually increasing the intensity and duration. According to these notes, we should see progressive improvement over the next few weeks. More movement, stronger sensations, better coordination. And then, if everything goes according to the traditional progression, Melody should be able to attempt standing within a month. Walking could follow within 6 to 8 weeks. Harrison felt his breath catch. The timeline seemed impossibly fast compared to conventional rehabilitation, which typically showed minimal improvement over years rather than weeks. "Is there anything else we need to do? Any special preparations or equipment?" "Just consistency, faith, and love," Yvonne said simply. "The most powerful healing happens when a child feels completely supported and believed in." Melody reached for both their hands, creating a circle of connection around her bed. "I love both of you," she said with the pure honesty that only children possess. "Daddy, thank you for letting Yvonne help me. And Yvonne, thank you for sharing your grandmother's gift." Harrison felt something ease in his chest that had been tight with worry for 8 years. For the first time since Melody's birth, he felt genuine hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope that had driven him to pursue impossible medical treatments, but a calm, centered certainty that his daughter was going to be okay. "We're a team now," he said, squeezing both their hands. "Whatever this process requires, whatever challenges we face, we'll handle them together." Outside, the last of the storm clouds were breaking apart, allowing rays of late afternoon sunlight to stream through the windows. The light fell across Melody's legs like a blessing, illuminating skin that was no longer pale and lifeless, but warm and filled with promise. As Harrison watched his daughter's peaceful face and saw the gentle strength in Yvonne's eyes, he realized that this was what healing really looked like. Not dramatic medical interventions or expensive equipment, but 3 people bound together by love and faith, working to restore what had been broken. The real miracle wasn't just that Melody's legs were beginning to move again. The miracle was that they had found each other across continents and cultures, guided by forces that were invisible but undeniable. 2 days after the storm, the healing sessions had become the centerpiece of their daily routine. Each morning and evening, the 3 of them gathered in Melody's room for what Harrison had started calling their miracle time. Melody's progress was undeniable. She could now move both legs with increasing coordination, lift her knees to her chest, and even maintain sensation in her feet for hours after each session. Harrison was in his office, researching ways to document Melody's improvement for potential medical review, when Mrs. Patterson knocked on his door with an expression that immediately put him on alert. "Mr. Blackstone, there are 2 people here to see you. They say it's regarding Melody's care." Her voice carried a tension he'd never heard before. "Who are they?" "Dr. Rebecca Thompson from Cedars-Sinai and someone from the Department of Children and Family Services." Harrison felt ice form in his stomach. "DCFS? Why would they be here?" "They wouldn't give me details, sir, but they've asked to speak with you immediately, and they want to examine Melody." Harrison's mind raced through possible explanations. Had someone reported unusual activity in the house during the storm? Had a neighbor seen Yvonne coming and going at irregular hours and misinterpreted the situation? He found Dr. Thompson in the main foyer alongside a stern-looking woman in her 50s wearing a navy blazer and carrying an official-looking briefcase. "Harrison," Dr. Thompson said, her usual warmth replaced by clinical distance. "This is Linda Morrison from DCFS. We need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to our attention." "What kind of concerns?" Harrison kept his voice steady, but his protective instincts were screaming. Ms. Morrison stepped forward, consulting a tablet in her hands. "Mr. Blackstone, We've received a report that your daughter is receiving unqualified medical treatment from a domestic worker. Additionally, there are concerns about your recent dismissal of her established medical team without arranging for replacement care. Who made this report? That's confidential, but we take any allegations of medical neglect very seriously, especially when they involve a disabled child. Harrison realized that Dr. Rodriguez must have filed a complaint after being dismissed. The man had probably painted Harrison as an unstable father chasing dangerous alternative treatments. There's been a misunderstanding, Harrison said carefully. Melody is receiving excellent care. Dr. Thompson spoke up. Harrison, Dr. Rodriguez told me you've terminated all conventional medical treatment and are now relying on some kind of folk healing. Is that accurate? It's more complicated than that. Mr. Blackstone, Ms. Morrison interrupted. We need to see your daughter immediately. If she's being subjected to unproven treatments that could be harmful, we have the authority to remove her from the home pending a full investigation. The words hit Harrison like physical blows. They wanted to take Melody away, separate her from a healing process that was finally working, all because they couldn't understand what they were witnessing. You can't just take my daughter. Actually, we can, Ms. Morrison said coolly. When a child's safety is at risk, we have broad authority to act. Now, please take us to see Melody. Harrison led them upstairs with growing dread, knowing that what they were about to witness would be impossible to explain within their framework of understanding. As they approached Melody's room, he could hear Yvonne's voice singing softly and Melody's delighted laughter. "Daddy, come see," Melody called out as they entered. "I can wiggle all my toes now." She was sitting up in bed, her legs stretched out in front of her, concentrating intensely as she moved her toes in sequence. The movements were clear, deliberate, and completely impossible according to her medical records. Dr. Thompson stopped dead in the doorway. "That's not possible. Her motor function tests show complete paralysis below T12. Yvonne, who had been sitting beside the bed guiding Melody through exercises, immediately stood and stepped back. Harrison could see fear flicker across her face as she took in the official-looking strangers. "Melody," Ms. Morrison said, her voice artificially gentle. "I'm Linda, and this is Dr. Thompson. We're here to make sure you're healthy and safe. Can you tell me what this woman has been doing with you?" "Yvonne's been teaching me how to remember how to use my legs," Melody said proudly. "Watch this." She concentrated for a moment, then lifted her right knee several inches off the bed. "I couldn't do that 3 days ago." Dr. Thompson moved closer to examine Melody's legs, her face a mixture of confusion and professional skepticism. "Harrison, what exactly has been happening here?" "Healing," Harrison said simply. "Real healing. There's no such thing as real healing for complete spinal cord transection," Dr. Thompson said sharply. "What I'm seeing here suggests either a misdiagnosis from the beginning or—" She trailed off, clearly struggling to find another explanation. Ms. Morrison had turned her attention to Yvonne. "Ma'am, what are your medical qualifications? Are you licensed to provide physical therapy or any other form of medical treatment?" "I'm not medically licensed," Yvonne replied quietly. "I was just sharing songs my grandmother taught me." "Songs?" Ms. Morrison's voice rose. "You're treating a paralyzed child with songs?" "Ms. Morrison," Harrison interjected, "you don't understand the situation." "I understand perfectly. A vulnerable disabled child is being subjected to unproven folk remedies by an unqualified caregiver while her father has abandoned legitimate medical care. This is exactly the kind of situation DCFS exists to address." "But it's working," Melody protested. "My legs are getting better. Why is that bad?" Dr. Thompson sat on the edge of the bed and began conducting a quick neurological examination. She tested Melody's reflexes, checked her sensation with a pin, and had her attempt various movements. With each test, her frown deepened. "This doesn't make medical sense," she muttered. "According to your scans, you shouldn't have any sensation or voluntary movement below your injury site." "Maybe the scans were wrong," Melody suggested. 8 years of scans can't all be wrong. Dr. Thompson looked up at Harrison. "I need to run new tests immediately. Full neurological workup, updated MRI, complete reassessment. Fine, Harrison said. Test whatever you want. But you'll find that Melody's condition is improving dramatically. Ms. Morrison was taking notes on her tablet. Mr. Blackstone, I'm going to need a complete explanation of what's been happening here. Who is this woman? What treatments has she been providing? And why did you terminate your daughter's medical care? Before Harrison could answer, Melody spoke up with the fearless honesty of childhood. You're all acting like what's happening to me is bad, but it's the best thing that's ever happened. For the first time in my whole life, I can feel my legs. Why are you trying to stop that? The question hung in the air, exposing the fundamental conflict between bureaucratic caution and miraculous possibility. Ms. Morrison and Dr. Thompson represented a system designed to protect children from harm, but their definition of harm didn't include preventing healing that fell outside conventional understanding. Melody, Dr. Thompson said gently, sometimes people can make us believe things are happening when they're not really happening. It's called the placebo effect. You think I'm making this up? Melody's voice carried hurt and indignation. Watch. She closed her eyes, concentrated, and then lifted both legs off the bed simultaneously, holding them in the air for several seconds before lowering them back down. The room fell silent. What Melody had just done was medically impossible, witnessed by 3 adults who couldn't deny what they'd seen. Ms. Morrison was the first to speak. Mr. Blackstone, I'm going to need to interview this woman separately, and I want Melody examined by an independent medical team. That's fine, Harrison said, though his stomach was churning. But I won't have Melody separated from her care. That may not be your choice to make, Ms. Morrison replied coldly. If we determine that this woman has been providing unqualified medical treatment, she could face criminal charges. And if we determine that you've been neglecting your daughter's medical needs, we'll remove her from your custody. Yvonne stepped forward, her face pale but determined. Ms. Morrison, I understand your concerns. But before you make any decisions, please let me explain what we've been doing. Ma'am, anything you say could be used in legal proceedings. I'd advise you to remain silent until you've consulted with an attorney. I don't care about legal proceedings, Yvonne said firmly. I care about that little girl. If explaining myself helps protect her access to healing, then I'll explain everything. Harrison watched as the woman who had been so careful about protecting herself suddenly became fierce in defense of Melody's well-being. It was a transformation that revealed the true depth of her commitment to the healing process. What we've been doing isn't medical treatment in the way you understand it, Yvonne continued. It's spiritual healing based on traditions that are thousands of years old. I'm not claiming to be a doctor or therapist. I'm sharing knowledge that my grandmother passed down to me, knowledge that's helping this child reconnect with her own healing power. Dr. Thompson shook her head. Spiritual healing doesn't regenerate severed nerve tissue. Maybe it doesn't regenerate anything, Yvonne replied. Maybe it just helps the spirit remember what the body never forgot. Ms. Morrison looked back and forth between them, clearly struggling with a situation that didn't fit into any of her usual categories. Mr. Blackstone, I'm placing a temporary hold on these sessions until we can complete our investigation. And I'm recommending immediate medical evaluation to ensure your daughter hasn't been harmed. You can't stop us from healing together, Melody said, her voice growing stronger. We're family now. Families take care of each other. Melody, Ms. Morrison said, this woman is not your family. She's an employee who may have overstepped her boundaries. She's more family to me than any of the doctors who told me I'd never get better, Melody shot back. Harrison felt his world beginning to crumble. Just when Melody was making unprecedented progress, bureaucratic intervention threatened to destroy everything they'd built together. The system that was supposed to protect his daughter was about to become her greatest obstacle to healing. I need you all to leave, he said quietly. Now, Mr. Blackstone, that's not how this works, Ms. Morrison replied. We have authority here. This is my home, and Melody is my daughter. If you want to continue this investigation, you can do it through proper legal channels with attorneys present. But right now, I want you out. The tension in the room was electric. Harrison could see Yvonne's hands shaking, Melody's eyes filling with tears, and the officials' faces hardening with bureaucratic determination. Everything they had worked for, everything they had built together, was about to be torn apart by people who couldn't understand that healing sometimes came in forms that couldn't be measured or controlled. Have you ever seen a system try to destroy something beautiful just because it didn't understand it? Share your thoughts in the comments, and please share this story with someone who understands that sometimes love has to fight for what's right. After the officials left with threats of legal action and custody proceedings, the mansion felt like a tomb. Harrison sat in his office, staring at his laptop screen, but the words of the legal documents he was trying to read blurred together. His mind kept circling back to the same impossible choice: protect Melody's healing or protect her from being taken away from him entirely. His phone had been ringing constantly since Dr. Thompson and Ms. Morrison departed. His attorney had called 3 times, urging him to comply with the DCFS investigation and immediately reinstate conventional medical care. The hospital's legal department wanted to schedule meetings. Child welfare advocates were demanding explanations he couldn't give without sounding delusional. But the call that shattered his remaining composure came at 2:45. "Mr. Blackstone, this is Attorney General Patricia Walsh's office. We understand there may be immigration law violations occurring in your household involving the provision of unlicensed medical services by a foreign national." Harrison's blood turned to ice. They weren't just coming after him for medical neglect. They were going after Yvonne's immigration status, threatening her with deportation for sharing her grandmother's healing knowledge. "I need to speak with my attorney," Harrison said. "Of course, sir. But I should inform you that ICE has been notified of the situation. If Ms. Campbell has violated the terms of her work visa by providing unauthorized medical services, she could be detained pending deportation proceedings." The line went dead, leaving Harrison staring at his phone in horror. In trying to heal his daughter, he had put Yvonne's entire future in America at risk. Her visa was tied to her employment as domestic help. If authorities reclassified her activities as unauthorized medical practice, she could lose everything. 3 floors above, Yvonne sat on her narrow bed, her grandmother's journal open in her lap. She had been packing her few belongings into 2 suitcases, preparing for what seemed inevitable. Her hands shook as she folded the yellow blouse she'd worn the first day she sang to Melody, remembering how terrified she'd been to reveal her gifts. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister in Kingston. "Everything okay? You haven't called in 3 days." How could she explain that she was about to lose everything because she tried to help a little girl walk? How could she describe the miracle she'd witnessed, the healing that was happening against all medical understanding, and the way a billionaire's daughter had looked at her with such trust and love? Another text appeared. "Immigration lawyer says you should be careful about overstaying your visa limits. Don't do anything that might jeopardize your status." Too late for that advice. Yvonne closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to her grandmother's spirit. "Nana, what do I do? If I stay and fight, I might be deported and never be able to help anyone again. But if I leave now, Melody loses her chance to walk." As if in response to her prayer, she heard small wheels rolling down the hallway outside her door. It was a sound she'd never heard before in a mansion, and it made her stomach drop with realization. She opened her door to find Melody propelling herself down the corridor in a wheelchair, her face streaked with tears. "Melody, what are you doing? How did you get down here?" "I made Daddy bring me," Melody said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "He wanted to keep me upstairs, but I told him I wasn't staying in that room while you packed to leave." Yvonne knelt beside the wheelchair, her heart breaking at the sight of this brave little girl who had been forced back into the mobility device she'd been transcending. "Sweetheart, the situation is complicated. The government people, they don't understand what we've been doing. So you're just going to give up?" Melody's green eyes flashed with an anger Yvonne had never seen before. "You're going to let them win? I'm trying to protect you. If I stay and they arrest me, you could get taken away from your daddy. That would be worse than anything." "No, it wouldn't." Melody's voice was fierce with conviction. "Being taken away from both of you would be the worst thing. But losing my chance to walk again because grown-ups are scared, that's the second worst thing." Harrison appeared at the end of the hallway, his face haggard with exhaustion and impossible decisions. "Melody, You shouldn't be down here bothering Yvonne while she's running away, Melody finished. Just like you want to run away from the lawyers and doctors. That's not fair, sweetheart. I'm trying to find a solution that keeps us all safe. Safe isn't the same as right, Melody shot back. Mama wouldn't have given up. The words hit Harrison like a physical blow. Eleanor had been fearless in the face of impossible odds, fighting for their unborn daughter's life, even when the doctor said both of them might die. She had chosen love over safety, hope over reasonable expectations. Melody, Harrison said quietly, what exactly are you asking me to do? Fight for us. Fight for our family. Melody reached out to take both their hands. The three of us together. We're stronger than we are apart. But if we fight and lose, the consequences could be devastating, Harrison said. Yvonne could be deported. You could be placed in foster care. I could lose you forever. And if we don't fight, Melody replied, I definitely lose my chance to walk, and we definitely lose each other anyway. Yvonne felt tears streaming down her cheeks. This 8-year-old child was displaying more courage than either of the adults who claimed to want to protect her. Melody's right, she heard herself saying. I've been so afraid of losing my status in America that I forgot why I came here in the first place. My grandmother didn't send me across an ocean to give up at the first sign of trouble. Harrison looked back and forth between them, these two people who had become the most important parts of his world in the span of just 4 days. If we're going to fight this, we need to be smart about it. We need evidence, documentation, witnesses who can testify to what they've seen. I could be a witness, Melody said immediately. I'll tell them exactly what happened to my legs. An 8-year-old's testimony won't be enough. We need medical professionals who can examine you and confirm the improvements. Yvonne suddenly straightened in her chair. What about Dr. Rodriguez? He examined you the day before I first sang to you. He has records of your complete lack of movement. He's the one who reported us to DCFS, Harrison reminded her. But he's also a doctor who documented your condition extensively. If we could get him to examine Melody now, to see the changes with his own eyes. He'd never agree to that. He thinks we're dangerous. Melody's face lit up with sudden inspiration. What if we didn't ask him? What if we just showed him? Harrison frowned. What do you mean? What if we went to his office? Just walked in during his regular hours and asked for an examination? If I can demonstrate movement and sensation that wasn't there 5 days ago, he'd have to acknowledge it as a medical professional. Melody, you can't walk yet. How would we walk into his office? Melody's smile was radiant with possibility. But I can move my legs now. I can feel them. And yesterday during our session, when I was dreaming about the beach with Mama, I almost felt like I could stand up. Almost isn't the same as actually doing it, Harrison said gently. Then let's find out what I can actually do, Melody said with determination that reminded Harrison powerfully of her mother. Let's do a healing session right now. A real one, with everything we've learned. And let's see how far I've really come. Yvonne looked uncertain. Melody, healing doesn't work on demand. It happens when the spirit is ready, when the conditions are right. The conditions are right, Melody insisted. We're all here, we all believe in what's possible, and we're not giving up on each other. Those are the only conditions that matter. Harrison felt something shift inside his chest. For days, he'd been trying to protect his daughter by controlling the situation, managing the risks, finding safe solutions. But Melody was teaching him that sometimes protection meant stepping into the unknown together, trusting in possibilities that couldn't be guaranteed. All right, he said quietly. Let's go upstairs. Let's see what's possible when we stop being afraid and start believing in what we've built together. As they made their way back to Melody's room, Harrison realized that the choice wasn't really between safety and risk. It was between hiding from their truth or standing up for it. Between accepting limitations or insisting on miracles. Between being separated by fear or united by love. Whatever happened next, they were going to face it as a family. Yvonne unpacked her suitcases while Harrison helped Melody out of the wheelchair and back in her bed. The afternoon light streaming through the windows felt different now, charged with possibility rather than shadowed by dread. Are you ready? Yvonne asked, opening her grandmother's journal to the page with the most advanced healing techniques. "We're ready," Harrison and Melody said in unison, as Yvonne began to sing the ancestral songs that had traveled across oceans and generations to reach this moment. Harrison placed his hands on his daughter's shoulders and felt the future opening up before them like a door that had been locked for 8 years. They were about to discover just how far love and faith could carry them when everything else fell away. When everything is on the line, what would you choose? Safety or the chance for a miracle? The courage of this family is incredible. Let me know in the comments what you think happens next. And don't forget to subscribe because this ending is going to leave you speechless. As Yvonne opened her grandmother's journal to the final, most powerful healing sequence, the late afternoon sun cast golden light across Melody's room. Harrison positioned himself at his daughter's shoulders while Yvonne moved to the foot of the bed, her hands hovering over Melody's legs with practiced precision. "This is different from what we've done before," Yvonne said softly, reading from her grandmother's carefully written notes. "This technique is designed to complete the healing circuit, to fully reconnect spirit and body. But it requires absolute trust and complete surrender to the process." "What does that mean?" Harrison asked. "It means letting go of any fear about what might happen and focusing only on what we want to create together," Yvonne explained. "It means believing not just in possibility, but in certainty." Melody closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "I'm ready. I can feel Mama here with us. She's been waiting for this moment." As Yvonne began to sing, her voice carried harmonies that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her physical form. The melody was deeper than the songs she'd shared before, more complex, layered with rhythms that felt ancient and timeless. Harrison could feel the vibrations through the floor, through the walls, through his own bones. Within moments, Melody's legs began moving in patterns more coordinated than anything they'd witnessed before. Both knees drew up toward her chest in alternating motions that looked exactly like walking steps. Her feet flexed and pointed, her toes spread and contracted, her entire lower body engaging in a symphony of movement that should have been impossible. "Oh my God," Harrison whispered. "Melody, can you feel all of that?" "I can feel everything," she replied, her voice filled with wonder. "It's like my legs are remembering how to dance." Yvonne's hands moved in intricate patterns above Melody's legs, weaving connections that looked like visible threads of light in the golden afternoon sun. Her voice rose and fell in waves of healing power that seemed to fill every corner of the room. For nearly 30 minutes, they continued the session. Melody's movements became stronger, more purposeful, more natural with each passing moment. Harrison could feel heat radiating from her legs, could see color returning to skin that had been pale for years. Finally, Yvonne began to bring the song to a close, her voice gentling into a whispered lullaby that seemed to seal the healing energy into Melody's body. "How do you feel, little one?" she asked. Melody opened her eyes, and Harrison was startled by what he saw there. His daughter's gaze held a depth and knowing that seemed far beyond her 8 years. "I feel whole," she said simply. "For the first time in my life, I feel completely whole." "Can you still feel sensation in your legs?" "Yes, but it's different now. Before, it was like they were waking up. Now they feel awake, really awake." Harrison watched as Melody slowly shifted position in bed, drawing her knees up and placing her feet flat against the mattress. The movements were deliberate, controlled, and completely natural. "Melody," he said quietly, "do you think you could try sitting up on the edge of the bed?" Instead of answering with words, Melody began to move. She pressed her hands into the mattress and pushed herself upright, then slowly swung her legs over the side of the bed. For the first time in 8 years, his daughter was sitting normally, her feet touching the floor. "This is incredible," Harrison breathed. "It's not finished yet," Melody said, her voice carrying absolute certainty. "Help me stand up." Harrison and Yvonne moved to either side of her, each taking one of her hands. Slowly, carefully, Melody began to push herself upright. Her legs shook with the effort of supporting weight they hadn't carried since birth, but they held. For several moments, she stood between them, wobbling slightly but unmistakably vertical. Tears streamed down Harrison's face as he watched his daughter experience standing for the first time in her life. "I want to try walking," Melody said. "Sweetheart, standing is already miraculous. Walking might be too much too soon." "Daddy," Melody looked at him with absolute confidence. "I've been walking in my dreams for days. My legs remember how. They just needed to remember they could." Slowly, carefully, she took a small step forward. Then another. Her gait was unsteady, her movements cautious, but she was walking. Actually walking. Harrison felt his knees go weak with emotion. 8 years of medical experts telling him this was impossible. 8 years of watching his daughter live with limitations that seemed absolute. And now she was walking across her bedroom like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We need to call Dr. Rodriguez," Harrison said suddenly. "We need to show him what's happened." "Are you sure?" Yvonne asked. "After everything that's occurred today? Especially after everything that's occurred today. He needs to see this. The world needs to see this." 30 minutes later, Dr. Rodriguez arrived at the mansion, accompanied by Dr. Thompson and 2 other medical professionals Harrison didn't recognize. Their expressions ranged from skeptical to hostile as they were led upstairs to Melody's room. "Mr. Blackstone," Dr. Rodriguez said coldly, "I agreed to come only because Dr. Thompson insisted we needed to document whatever dangerous nonsense you've been subjecting your daughter to." "Just examine her," Harrison replied. "Test her mobility, her sensation, her reflexes. Compare what you find to the records from your last visit." Dr. Rodriguez set up his equipment with obvious reluctance while the other doctors watched. As he began testing Melody's reflexes, his expression slowly changed from dismissive to confused to stunned. "This is impossible," he muttered, testing her ability to feel pinpricks along her legs. "According to your medical history, you should have no sensation below your injury site." "But I do," Melody said cheerfully. "Want to see me walk?" Before anyone could stop her, Melody pushed herself up from her bed and began walking around the room. Her steps were still cautious, but she moved with increasing confidence, even managing to turn around and walk back to where the doctor stood in shocked silence. Dr. Thompson was frantically checking the medical records on her tablet. "This doesn't match anything in her file. Complete spinal cord transection at T12, documented through multiple MRIs, no motor function below the injury site for 8 years. Yet here she is, walking," Harrison said quietly. Dr. Rodriguez completed his examination in stunned silence, testing Melody's strength, coordination, and sensory responses. Every test showed dramatic improvement from her documented baseline. "I need to run comprehensive imaging studies," he said finally. "MRI, CT scan, full neurological workup. This level of recovery is medically unprecedented." "Then maybe," Yvonne said gently, "it's time to expand your understanding of what's medically possible." Dr. Thompson looked up from her tablet. "Ms. Campbell, I owe you an apology. I don't understand what you've done here, but the results speak for themselves." "I haven't done anything," Yvonne replied. "I've simply helped this little girl remember her own wholeness." 6 weeks later, Harrison stood in the same spot where he'd first watched Melody's legs move in response to Yvonne's songs. But now, instead of lying motionless in bed, his daughter was running across the mansion's back garden, her laughter carrying on the February breeze. The legal challenges had evaporated once the medical documentation proved Melody's recovery was real and sustained. DCFS had closed their investigation. Dr. Rodriguez had published a case study on unexplained neurological recovery, and Yvonne's visa had been extended with a special provision recognizing her as a cultural healer. More importantly, Yvonne had moved into the mansion permanently, not as domestic help, but as Melody's healing companion and Harrison's closest friend. The 3 of them had become a family bound not by blood, but by love, faith, and shared belief in miracles. "Daddy, watch this," Melody called out, executing a perfect cartwheel on the grass. Harrison watched his daughter's joyful movement, still amazed every day by the gift they'd been given. Yvonne appeared beside him, her grandmother's journal tucked under her arm. "My grandmother would be so proud," she said softly. "She always said love, was the most powerful medicine. "Thank you," Harrison said, words that could never adequately express his gratitude. "Thank you for seeing what was possible when no one else could." "Thank you for being brave enough to believe," Yvonne replied. "And thank you for showing me that healing happens when people choose love over fear." As they watched Melody run and play with the pure joy of a child whose body finally matched her spirit, Harrison felt Eleanor's presence surrounding them like a blessing. His wife's love had brought Yvonne across oceans to heal their daughter. Her spirit had guided them through doubt and danger to this moment of perfect wholeness. Sometimes miracles looked like sophisticated medical procedures or cutting-edge technology. But sometimes they looked like a grandmother's healing songs, carried across generations by hands that remembered how to touch the places where spirit met flesh. Sometimes the most profound healing happened when love refused to accept limitations, when faith proved stronger than fear, and when three hearts chose to believe in possibilities that couldn't be measured or explained. Melody ran toward them, her face glowing with health and happiness, her legs strong and sure beneath her. As she launched herself into Harrison's arms, he caught her easily, spinning her around while her laughter filled the air. Their family was complete. Their daughter was whole, and love had proven, once again, that it could overcome anything. What an incredible journey this has been, from despair to hope, from impossible to inevitable. This family found healing through the power of love, faith, and ancient wisdom. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.